I'll- My name is Yvonne Cosentino, and I am the Occupational Therapy Assistant Program Director at Lincoln Land Community College, which is here in Springfield, Illinois. So at the end of this, if you need to email a question, it's my first name, Yvonne dot Cosentino, my last name, Cosentino. And don't put an N in front of the S like everybody does. That makes me Greek, and I'm Italian, and the email won't go through. And then it's at llcc.edu. So you can reach me there. I do answer anybody's question. So, all right. So I'm an occupational therapist, and I don't like to think about it, but I've been an OT for 37 years. Being that old is helpful in the world of sensory integration because when I went to school, one of my pediatric instructor actually trained with Dr. Ayers, who is the founder of sensory integration therapy and sensory processing disorder. She was one of her research assistants, and so I had a really strong introduction to sensory integration. And since that time, I was able to get certified back in 2012. It's kind of a complicated process, but when you're certified, you're able to give the sensory integration and praxis test, which is considered the gold standard for sensory integration testing. So a little bit later in the hour, we'll talk about assessments. And there are some more simplified assessments that you can do, and I've got a link on this program to a free assessment through the STAR Center in Colorado, and that's with Dr. Lucy Jane Miller, and she was another one of Dr. Ayers' research assistants who is really continuing to support research and efficacy with sensory integration today. Sensory integration is probably more known today than it was in the 70s, definitely in the 80s, and it's really come into its own, and lots of people are now adding to that research. So we're really in a good time for helping individuals find those keys to success. Today we're going to talk about sensory integration and self-regulation. It doesn't matter if you have level 1, level 2, or level 3 autism. If your reaction to sensory input is severe, or as we call it, a big reaction, it doesn't match the size of the problem, then your level 3 autism, could actually look even more severe. Your level 1 autism can look like you're more severe. So we have to find ways to help everybody. It doesn't matter what the level you have is. And as occupational therapists, we don't necessarily look at the person's level of autism in the diagnosis. We look at their functional abilities. So we're going to talk about that today, just what is sensory processing, how does it interact and affect self-regulation. We're going to talk about assessment tools that are available, free assessment tools that anybody can use, as well as those that can be used by an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a teacher. Some physical therapists are specializing in this. So we're going to be checking those out. And then also, what kind of strategies can we do? What are the keys to help students and children perform at their best, whether they're at home, at school, or during community activities? So there are specific keys. Sometimes you have to try a lot of keys. Did you ever have a whole bunch of keys in your hand and you went to open the door and you're not sure which one it is and you have to just keep trying? That's how sensory processing disorder can feel. Like the key is there, it's just you're not sure which one it is. And as long as you keep trying and consistently persevere with those trials, you will find the key. Once you find the key, it's going to be helpful to everybody, but mostly for that person who you are assisting. So Dr. Ayers came up with the sensory integration theory. Back in the 1950s, she started noticing that people in her own family didn't perform to their capacity. She felt that they had more intellect and more abilities than they were displaying in public situations, large group settings. And so she really wanted to find out why some people weren't able to perform even though they had the skills. You know, whenever we talk about behaviors, we talk about, is it a skill deficit or a performance deficit? She was looking at performance and saying, what is it about their makeup that is impacting their ability to really excel and perform to their capacity? And she realized that it was because of a lot of the sensory influences in the environment, in the context of the demands of the situation, that were impacting a person's ability to filter that information out and to be flexible enough to be able to ignore or suppress some of that sensory information and respond to the important sensory information so that you are behaving as expected. The outcome is expected or is anticipated is what's socially acceptable. So it's a process of taking all of that sensory information in, quickly filtering it out through experiences, and then being able to respond appropriately. It's called an appropriate adaptive reaction. And so even as we sit in this room, we hear a lot of commotion over there. We hear, I don't know if you can hear it, I can hear that hissing. I know that my clicker wasn't working and they want me tied over here. I like to walk around. And so lots of sensory changes for me today, but fortunately, my brain and body have been experienced enough where I can be flexible in my thinking and in my abilities so that we can still try to, I can get you this information, and hopefully it will be in an understandable manner. So our kids are not always able to do that. From an early age, if there is a sensory processing challenge, usually you will see that in the beginning. But as we grow and age, the expectations are bigger, the challenges are bigger, and so we don't always keep up with those if there's an underlying sensory processing issue. Sometimes it could be a small sensory aversion. You don't like sticky things on your hand. You're just a little bit annoyed by those things. When I went to plug in the cord, it was really sticky, and I still have it on my hand. So that's a mild thing when you're growing up. In school, there's not a lot of sticky except maybe glue. You can use a glue stick. You don't have to get glue all over your hands. There's a way to accommodate that. But with all of the other changes we had today, or I had to deal with today, now I've got sticky stuff on my hand. There is no way. My nervous system is really on the verge of overload. And that's what happens to our kids. I'm not on the verge of overload. I'm good with sticky. As a matter of fact, I probably got more sticky. I was moving boxes before I came in to our new classroom. So anyways, but our children, it doesn't matter if they're level 1, level 2, or level 3. If they have a lot of other stressors going on in their day, if they have a lot of things that they're trying to manage at one time, multi-steps they're trying to process, if they have a small sensory aversion, it can really change their attention, their focus, their participation, and possibly even create an unexpected behavior. So this is where all that input is coming into all of our senses. We have lots of senses, and we're going to talk about each and every one of those in a simplified manner. But when you do the sensory integration and praxis test, you realize that all of these senses that we have, our 5 general ones, smelling, hearing, seeing, touching, and tasting. Also, there's 2 other ones, proprioception, which is motor function, and vestibular, which is ability to understand movement and your body position in space. There's lots of input coming in at one time to keep us alert, to keep us organized, and to keep us focused on what it is that the task demands are. But we have to filter out the extraneous things. And it's in that filtering out that we will have either a very functional output, we'll have the appropriate expected output, maybe we'll have some version of that. It's possible that you are still able to function at what would be considered an acceptable level, but maybe it's not to your capacity. So our students, we shouldn't accept a minimal capacity from them. We'll want to make sure that we have everything set up for them to be able to succeed. And so we want to help them process that sensory information so that their output is at the absolute best output for them. And that when the child succeeds, it doesn't matter what the level of success is, it's going to help motivate that child and build those experiences so they can build on those successes, build on those skills, and then really come out on the top. So, and as parents, caregivers, teachers, that's what we want to see. So who do we have in our audience today? Raise your hand if you are a parent. Lots of parents, awesome. Raise your hand if you're a teacher. Quite a few teachers, great. How about a caregiver, daycare center, home caregiver? Wonderful. Do we have any therapists here? One, great, nice to see you. And psychologists or social workers, other professionals? Okay, I think, what is your profession? Behavior analyst, excellent. I didn't mean to skip over that one. So wonderful, welcome. And somebody in the back? Okay, excellent. So this is going to be good information. It's just a little touch of that good information. Lincoln Land has put on a training that I've done every fall, so you might want to watch for that. It's for teachers, and it's talking about specific plans that you can use to help with interventions and accommodations in the classroom. So I'm assuming we'll do that again. It's probably going to be in November, and it's really cost effective. So it's a 6-hour training for minimal price. And all of that money goes to support the college. All right, so when we talk about vision, we're talking about too much, too little, or the just right amount. You're going to hear those words for every sensation. But in a classroom setting, teachers often have what's called walls that teach. Typical sensory processing, kids benefit from all of the visual information around them. They're expected to look around, read and learn, and be able to recall those things, be able to use those things. But for a child who becomes visually dysregulated, overwhelmed by too much visual information, they're not going to know what to look at or what to focus on. And it's going to just heighten their sensitivity. So when there's too much visual information and they're not able to filter that out, they start to accelerate that nervous system response. So they're having maybe trouble with focusing. They're going to have trouble with following those directions, with performing the motor steps to those directions if they are getting overwhelmed by too much visual information. It doesn't even have to be on the walls. It can be their desk. So oftentimes if somebody becomes visually disorganized, their person is disorganized. They have trouble organizing their space, organizing their materials. I'm sure our parents can see this at home. Teachers see this in the classroom. The children don't know where to go find something. They can't find something that's right in front of them, and they need help with those organization things. Too little is more of our severe level of autism. So children that are more level 3 have trouble with with responding to sensory information. They tend to be hypo-responsive, under-responsive. So if there's not enough visual information there, they're not going to notice it. So we need high contrast. We'll talk about environmental things later. But we have to organize our visual information, but also use some low vision strategies that we use with our kids that have visual impairment. providing contrast, providing light, providing clear access, so that when they do scan to it, even though it takes a little bit longer, that they will notice it and they'll respond to it appropriately and not be startled by it. Sometimes if somebody is hypo-responsive to visual information or any of the senses, when they do notice it, they will startle by it, and so that's where the reaction becomes unexpected and a larger reaction than the situation calls for. But when you get it just right, it's a nice, organized visual display. You can't always control the visual information coming in. One of the big areas where I hear from parents that children really have a hard time going is shopping at Walmart. So think about all the visual things going on there, not to mention the auditory things. The parking lot is crowded, the carts are there, the carts are moving in and out, people are moving in and out. The lighting is kind of a gray look in Walmart. I like to think of it, the difference between Walgreens and CVS. There's a stark difference in visual appearance when you walk into a Walgreens, really bright lights, which are fine if you need extra light. If you have a visual problem, the light glares off of the shiny floor, the tile floor, and it can cause a problem for that. But it's brightly lit versus CVS. It's really darker when you go into those stores. And I've gone into both of them in a variety of states. And CVS, I think, has carpet on the floor that's darker, so there's no glare. So it's good if you have a visual impairment, but if you are hypo-responsive to visual info, you need that bright light that Walgreens has, really organized aisles. So there is a difference, and there is a difference when you're shopping, say at Walmart, between there and Target. Target's bright, the aisles are wider. All of that visual stimulation matters if somebody is either over-responsive and there's too much visual information, or under-responsive and it takes them longer to process visualization, so that you will have to find the just right amount. And there's ways to do that and still shop at Walmart. You don't have to make a decision as to where you're going to shop. You can help sensitize somebody who is not processing that visual information appropriately. And you can do that incrementally using a variety of strategies. But the first strategy to sensitize somebody to it is just to drive through the parking lot. Spend a little bit of time talking about that. You have to work your way into actually shopping when a child is visually overstimulated by something. If they are visually understimulated by something, we have to increase the awareness. So you might have them hold the cart or add a tactile, add another sensory experience to it. So when they're participating in that shopping activity, you're adding to their under-responsiveness by having them carry something. If they're sitting in the cart, can they hold something that you're shopping for? Can they help push the cart if they're a little bit older? How can they participate in that in a more, where we're accessing other sensory systems? You want to access those motor systems. If it's the sound combined with vision, then you might want to use some headphones with music. So that brings us to hearing. A lot of times, children have more than one sensory system that is over-responsive or under-responsive. You can be over-responsive to auditory information, things that you're hearing, and you can be under-responsive to visual information. So that's not a good combination when you have to go to the grocery store. There is a lot of noise at the grocery store or at Walmart, wherever it is you're trying to get the job done, and you have to bring your child with you. So we have to accommodate for that auditory sensitivity so that their visual system can process that information. Maybe you're going to offer noise-reducing headphones. They have different kinds of headphones. There's noise-reducing headphones. There's noise-canceling headphones where you can't hear anything. And then there's headphones where you can actually play their favorite music or some very calming, organizing classical music from your phone for them, some wireless headphones. All of our kids are different. And to meet that auditory sensitivity need, we have to tap into those other systems. So if you're working with an occupational therapist, they're going to look at calming the entire system by providing some sensory input to other systems. Usually motor and tactile systems are very calming. And when their system is organized, then you're going to challenge them with some higher level auditory input, bringing them into noisier group situations, going to the grocery store. But they have lots of different adaptive devices that you can use for hearing. One of the things that's very calming for somebody who becomes really oversensitized by auditory input is vibration. And there is a neck vibrating pillow. It's soft. It can even fasten here. It's memory foam. It has vibration, and sometimes you can even find that online with a little bit of music that's built into it. But the child can initiate, do they want low vibration, higher vibration, or no vibration? Just the warmth and pressure from that neck pillow. And many, many kids are able to overcome those challenges from aversive auditory input. Like with the noise next door, I feel like we all need one of those pillows today. But we're doing a good job at filtering that out, and I'm sure they're dealing with my noise as well. So you can comfort yourself with that. But those pillows are controlled by the child. We don't put something on a child and say, here, this will help you. The child has to know what helps them. We keep it accessible. We keep these sensory adaptations accessible for them. So the pillow can be in a place where they know they can get it. The headphones can be in a place where they know they can get it. And the access to music needs to be ready for them so that our children can become independent self-regulators. We don't want to do unto that child. We want that child to learn what they need. In the beginning, you're going to have to show them how that is helpful. You're going to give them experiences with a variety of different adaptations to help them deal with sound. But they're going to be the ones to choose the one that works for them. Because if it's not working for them, it's not going to be used, and it's not going to do the job for you. So we want to get it so that we add those adaptations, and it will become just right for them to hear in a variety of settings. Also with music, kids have different preferences with music. Classical music is very organizing. Piano classical music is some of the most organizing, and that's because of the vibration component. And so vibration is one of the most calming inputs, but again, it's the child's choice. And there are some programs out there that focus on listening, but you don't have to go and become trained in those programs. You have to just have supports available that will help that child, whether it's filter the sound or use another system, a motor system or the vibration for those pain fibers to help them through it. And when I say motor, a lot of times what I like to do when I'm working with kids is movements to music. So we have very organized music that we're using in an expected familiar routine, and we do movements to it. We do movements from sitting positions, from standing positions. We work in some exercises. I'll use therabands, or I will use maracas, different things that the kids can use together. And so rhythm is also very calming. Rhythm and music and movement will help that child tolerate more and more sound. And frequently, you can overcome that sensitivity to noise. They will assimilate that and will improve each and every week, hopefully. Smells are another thing that don't get a lot of attention, But if you're in a cafeteria at school or even at home and you're cooking, there are so many different smells that are going to be affecting somebody's thought process about what it is they have to eat. And so a lot of times when children with autism have eating challenges, a lot of times it's routinized behavior, that they will only eat this kind of chicken nuggets, this kind of Nutri-Grain bar, this kind of yogurt. But sometimes it's not just that. It starts possibly with a sensory issue. That sensory issue says, oh, that tastes okay to me, that smells okay to me, and so I can eat that. And I don't like the smell of the other things, I'm not going to try that. It's very difficult when you have to cook at home or when a child is in a cafeteria at school to be able to change the smells that are in that environment. But we can change their perception of those smells by helping them first ease into it. And so if you're cooking something strong at home and you know your child has a problem with that, can they play in a different area or in their room or outside so that they don't have to smell it while you're cooking it initially? The other thing is adding the cognitive awareness to what those smells are associated with. So today, say if I'm cooking at home, we're having spaghetti, and in the spaghetti sauce, it's got tomatoes, and you have, say, a plastic tomato. It has garlic, it has onion sometimes, and you have all the ingredients there, and the kids learn about those ingredients. Of course, I'm talking about a child that's a little bit older, but you know, a 3-year-old can like to help in the kitchen. Even a 2-year-old is a little bit helpful at times in the kitchen. A lot of times when they have a label for that smell, the smell is not as overwhelming as it once was. And they know that it's a combination of these things. And so we can help them to even participate in the cooking process or add a motor part. Can you set the table? Can you find the spoons? You know, can you find the forks? We're adding that cognitive part. We're keeping them engaged in a meal activity while they're still exposed to the smell. And so if they become a part of it, they're not going to be as overwhelmed by those smells. And once they know what those are, it's very helpful. I work, in addition to Lincoln Land Community College, I also work at the Illinois School for the Deaf and the Illinois School for the Visually Impaired. And smell and taste in the cafeteria is a large problem for some of our visually impaired children because they can't see what's being prepared. It's noisy in the cafeteria. There's a lot of clanging and chairs moving. And processing all of that auditory information while they're trying to navigate motorically, they're trying to find the line, they're trying to find their tray, trying to find their chair. It's very overwhelming to the nervous system, so that by the time you do sit down, you realize that those smells, you're suddenly not hungry, and it doesn't smell very good anyways, even though to me it always smells very good. And so it affects their nutritional intake oftentimes, and I know that that is a concern for many, many parents of children with autism. So when there is an issue with that, just working with a speech therapist or an OT or a combination of the two is going to help you find strategies and chaining techniques that, and cognitive, participation for the child to be able to participate more in the planning part so that they can have a label for that smell and hopefully tolerate more and more smells and more variety in their diet. Taste goes along with smell. We've kind of covered that. But again, sometimes it's not the taste, sometimes it's not the texture, sometimes it's routinized behavior. This is what I eat. And it really doesn't matter what the cause is. The problem is the outcome. They're not eating a variety of food groups. They're not eating a variety of food choices. And so we have to help them visually, same as with smell, identifying what it is, giving them a tactile picture of it in their hand. You can cut out pictures from a box if it's something that comes in a box. You can show all the different places they can get those things, and if the child helps with shopping for it, cleaning it, preparing it, it's going to help them to tolerate more and more smell and taste. I used to do a dining group at the School for the Visually Impaired where we all sat down at a large table and everybody knew the rules. The rules were always outlined ahead of time and reviewed before every meal. Everybody had to serve themselves family style. They took a little bit or a lot, depending on what they liked, but they took some of it, and it was always on their plate. They didn't have to eat it, but they had to smell it and touch it and feel it and experience it in different ways. And we did encourage people to touch it to their lip or touch it to their tongue. And with time, people ate more and more. And to help with the stress part, we allowed them, everybody once a month got to choose a dining friend. It could be a teacher, it could be a social worker, a friend from school, a peer. And so they got to bring somebody with them. Sometimes we had guest friends, and that was really exciting for them. And so I was trying to override the anticipation of unpleasant smells and tastes, the anticipation of unpleasant, foods with the excitement of having a new person coming to the table. So I was trying to override those fears and anxieties. And it works really well when you do it in a structured, organized manner, and you have buy-in from whether it's a child at school or your own child. If they're helping set the table, decorating the table, we used to put different kinds of chair designs and decorations, all to celebrate the meal and eating, to take the focus off the food. And so it became more of a social experience, which is really, in many cases, what eating is. So those are some strategies you can do by using those other sensory systems. So the somatosensory system is your touch system. Now, there's a lot that's involved with the touch system. Fine motor skills develop through the touch system. You have to know the just right amount, what we call tactile modulation or force. How much force do you use to manipulate something? How much force does it take to pick up a spoon and be able to gather a few peas? The tactile system is complex. Also, the tactile system allows us to notice things. We notice if something is on our arm or something is on our face and we need to clean it. We notice if we're standing too close to somebody. It contributes to our awareness of personal space boundaries. The tactile system is a very powerful system, and it develops at birth. Lots of people think that during that birthing process, that big squeeze as the child is coming through the birth canal is giving you a lot of deep pressure touch so that you're welcomed into this, into the world. It's cold in the room. There's lights. There's a lot of people you don't know. You get a tap on your bottom usually, or wherever they're tapping kids babies these days. And it's not a very pleasant welcoming the first few minutes. But then you get to mom and there's more touch. So the babies that have C-sections don't always get that touch, but they get swaddled. They're swaddled and they're given to mom right away. So they're missing that very first touch, and so sometimes you might notice that a child is a little bit tactile defensive, we call it, where they're aversive to certain touches. We all are born with certain sensory personalities. My husband will say, if you don't have 4 legs and a tail, give her a little space, because I have a big personal space zone. I don't like people touching me too much, but I have no problem touching people. I will lay hands on, no problem at all, and as a therapist, that's important to be able to do. But I'm not a huggy person unless you're the cat or the dog, and we have plenty of those at my house. So our sensory personalities don't define who we are. It just makes up our preferences for certain things. But when it comes to the tactile system, being such a powerful system in developing and exploring our world with our hands, developing those fine motor skills, it's a requirement as we go through school, being able to manipulate objects as expected, being able to perform self-help activities. If you're aversive to touch, you're not exploring a lot of things. You're probably playing with the same things that are not going to make you defensive. So maybe blocks. We like to use blocks. Sensory play can be really, really highly calming. So some kids like to play in the running water or splashing water, sand. Provide a very calming sensory activity, and you might not be able to even get that child's attention when you call their name. So in the issue with tactile processing, you can become very, very involved if you're seeking that tactile information. So it may be too little. If you're hypo-responsive to tactile information, you're seeking it, and because it takes a lot to really meet your needs. So you'll play in the water for a long period of time. You'll play in the sand and not want to leave it. You'll find whatever that tactile input is, and you're going to have a hard time breaking away from it or shifting your attention if somebody's calling your name. Or if kids are playing around you and they want to make a different game, let's just not just dig in the sand, let's make some castles with the bucket. So everybody else might be making castles with the bucket, and you're in your spot digging, and it's going to be very annoying if they try to involve you in that or if they come into your space. So that's where we have to get to that just right amount. We have to enter that space so that while they're seeking that sensory information, oftentimes it's tactile, we're adding to it slowly but surely. We're giving tools. We're developing the fine motor skills and the visual motor integration skills, that eye-hand coordination that needs to expand from tactile. A lot of speech therapists and OTs, myself included, understand that in development, as a child starts moving through developmental patterns of not just now rolling, but moving into four-point and crawling, the hand and the mouth are very connected. And if you watch some of the research videos as a child is crawling, their mouth is moving. And so that hand-mouth connection impacts feeding skills, communication and language skills. And so as you're exploring with your hands, you start to explore with your mouth at the same time, and those oral motor skills are developing together. So think about a child who is tactile defensive and they're not exploring with their hands. What's happening with their mouth? Probably not the same oral motor training, moving your lips, moving your tongue in the directions that need to be strengthened for speech development. And so a tactile defensive issue can affect some of those oral motor skills down the road as those two systems start to develop together. So we can help sensitize kids to tactile information, but you do have to do it very slowly and cautiously. I like to add movement as they're exploring those things, or make sure that you're minimizing any other system that might be overloaded, like the auditory or the visual system. And so you can do jumping and reaching for things. You can work from a variety of positions using big therapy balls. With the tactile system, it also works with that proprioceptive system, your joint receptors, so that they know how much pressure to use. They know what position your joint is in. They know how much force it takes to pick something up. And so when you use a large therapy ball and you can move a child from head to heel, we call it rocking back and forth, it's adding rhythm and movement, proprioceptive input, as well as tactile. And so kids are more open to exploring different sensations and objects that way. So you sometimes have to pair these sensory experiences to overpower one system and start to assimilate another system. It's complex, but when you get the basics and start to trial it, you'll see it. And once you see it and experience it, you'll figure it out. And all of the kids' needs are different. So just when you figured it out for Johnny, you need something different for Janie. So then we have our hidden senses. the hidden sense of vestibular, that's in your inner ear. That helps with your eye and head control, your balance. Your vestibular system is stimulated by linear movement and rotational movement. So any angle movement, it's the fluid and crystals in your inner ear. Sometimes one of those crystals will get stuck. Have you ever heard of that? People will end up, they'll get up to get out of bed, and there's a crystal stuck, and the whole room is going to be spinning, and you need a technique where they just move your head really quickly to try to unjar that crystal. But it can put you on the floor, and it's very hard to control. Now, our children with vestibular issues don't have that problem, but they are very sensitive to movement. Maybe they become car sick. Maybe it's traumatic just getting them into the car. Maybe they avoid playground equipment. It's not fun to go down the slide. It's not fun to climb up to get down to the slide. Riding a bike is difficult. With the vestibular system, it helps us to coordinate our head and eye movements. So we are able to smoothly track across a room, look for something, keep our balance while we're playing with something. Have you ever seen children? I know when my children were in kindergarten, they'd come home from school and you'd say, what'd you do today? Well, nothing. I finally stopped asking that question, and the first question I always asked was, who fell out of their chair today? And there was always somebody that fell out of their chair today. And it's because you're processing, kids at age 5 are processing lots of sensory information. The system they lose track of is the vestibular system, and they have not noticed that they're leaning to the side and they've fallen out of the chair, or they fall backwards or down. Kids don't usually get hurt, but they oftentimes lose track of that vestibular system. And so that is the system that helps with those first movements. When infants turn their head, we reflexively know to move our hand, and our eyes follow it, and we find our hands that way. So in the beginning, all of these systems are strengthened through reflexive activity. But as we develop through those developmental motor patterns, we strengthen these systems. So when we move from rolling into a 4-point position, where are your eyes now? Your eyes are down, but in order to be able to scan the room, the child has to be able to pick up their head while they're in that 4-point position and turn their head side to side and visually track. And so in the beginning, the eyes and the head are all together, but as they develop that vestibular system along with their visual system, they can start to track and keep their head straight. They can look to the side. They can look up. They can see depth perception as they're going up and down stairs. Think about our children with autism's developmental motor skills. Usually there's a developmental delay. And so oftentimes, by the time a child gets to kindergarten, the eyes have not isolated themselves or differentiated themselves from the head, and the whole body is moving. Sorry, just like I keep hitting that microphone. So the problem becomes then movements are clumsy, visual tracking is clumsy, eye-hand coordination is not well developed, so that when you're in PE and you're part of a ball game, you're probably not going to catch that ball, because with our vestibular system, we have to have anticipation as well. We have to have experienced it, so we know timing. There's a lot of things, pacing and timing, as well as one-sided coordination, two-sided coordination. That is all contributed to by the combination of the vestibular system, the vision, proprioceptive system, which we're going to talk about next. So with that vestibular system, just like tactile, it's a really powerful system. Kids can get sick, actually physically ill, if we overwhelm that system. There are a couple of programs out there that part of the program is spinning the child. You should not spin a child that does not want to spin. You can overwhelm the system and have a physiological response 2 hours later or 3 hours later where the blood pressure rises, the heart rate goes up, you start sweating. Kids have to take in vestibular information at their own pace. And so we offer things, when we set up a sensory environment for children or a sensory space, we offer all of these things, a small swing, maybe a rocking chair, a tunnel, tubes, balls they can roll on, but kids need to be able to access that at their readiness. We don't force a child to sit on a saucer and spin and spin and spin. They can really become sick. We all spin at different amounts, yes.
What if they're like hypo-responsive?
So there are seekers. So sensory seekers, we have our seekers. And those children, if they took some skating lessons, might become great figure skaters who spin and spin and spin. As part of the sensory integration and praxis test, one of the assessments is to check vestibular tolerance. And you sit the person on a spinning board and tilt the head at a certain degree, certain angle, so that those crystals are in the right position, and you slowly and rhythmically turn that 10 times in each direction. And then we look at their eye response afterwards. It's called post-rotary nystagmus. Your eyes are moving. Your head is still and your eyes are moving. That's because your brain is still moving inside your head. So some people will have very little or short duration post-rotary nystagmus, and they're the seekers. They can take lots of spinning. When they sat me on that and turned me, now I ran track in college. I was very athletic, but I don't spin. And so when I did the test during our training, they weren't sure how long my eyes were going to go for. I think they went for 2.5 minutes, and I just sat there holding on to the saucer because I thought I was going to fall off. I was so dizzy. So I'm not a spinner. I don't like spinning. But we all have different levels of spinning. Some of you may like lots of spinning at the fair or some of the, rides, but some of us don't do much at all. And then others are just at the just right level. So I don't get car sick. I do fine with linear, but it's the rotation I'm not a big fan of. So for those kids, yeah, it's fine. Have that sensory information available. For those kids who seek vestibular input, they tend to be our more high-energy kids. And high-energy kids need a lot of access to those things, but one way to override that vestibular system is with this next one, the proprioceptive system. These are the systems in your joints, your joint receptors, pushing, pulling, heavy work play, running, jumping, carrying things. All of those things are activating and strengthening your proprioceptive system. Think about when you see a box on the floor and you go to pick it up because you knew you had books in that box, or you're expecting it to be heavy. You bend your knees, you pick it up, and somebody had taken the books out and that box goes flying. So your proprioceptive system was confused by your past experience of putting the books in and your visual knowledge that, yeah, that's the same box I used. So we have to give our kids who are seekers lots of opportunity for vestibular and proprioceptive input. So having them help with activities. In the school setting, kids who are often, a little bit, they move too much, they have big reactions to things. I like to schedule in motor breaks for them that have heavy proprioceptive work. And so functional tasks, one task that's really great that also incorporates vibration is a shredding. Kids would go to the office and they would have a shred box of materials there, and they could shred for 20 minutes, help the secretary. It's a scheduled job, so they know for 20 minutes I'm bending, I'm picking up these papers, and I'm shredding them. The sound, the vibration is very calming. And another job that is good for these vestibular and proprioceptive seekers is a pencil sharpening job. I would organize trays with classrooms on each tray, and the student would push a cart and go from classroom to classroom, find the tray that goes with that cart, and the teacher would keep all the pencils that needed sharpening in one area. The kid would put them in there, go, and for 20 minutes sharpen pencils, and then return them, say, at another job. So you can use functional activities. I like to always use functional activities for sensory accommodations because it's practical. It's not just taking away from the learning. You're teaching those vocational skills, and it's engaging those thinking patterns. You have to look at the time, know the schedule, comply with the amount of time that's allotted, and still get all of the benefits from that sensory information that you're participating in. So sensory diets, I'm sure we've all heard of sensory diets, sensory protocols. It's important that we have functional activities. During free time, it's fine to have those other sensory integration activities. Access to a sensory space. Maybe it's the playground, maybe it's a separate sensory room with all of those wonderful fun things in there. There's time for that. Recess, scheduled time, play time, free time. Those are things you can have access to. But to meet those sensory needs during the day, I like it to be a functional scheduled task that is going to meet those needs. And then when you do return to class, you should be more ready for the learning. Okay, and then interoception. This is a difficult one. This is a really hidden sense. This is your awareness of your internal senses. So some of our children don't know when they've eaten too much and they're full. I know many kids will suddenly throw up because they don't know they're going to throw up. That's an interoception sense. You get the feeling, you know you're going to throw up. And a lot of times it's because they also didn't know they were full and they ate too much. And so they'll just sit there and not know they're going to throw up. Also with toilet training. You have to have good interoception sense to know I have to go to the bathroom. I need to plan ahead. I need to go in now from recess so that I don't have an accident. You can teach interoception sense, but it's very difficult, and it takes a little bit of time. So start with scheduling those things. Start with teaching the right amount of food to eat. Start with how does our body feel? Are we feeling hot? And then have pictures of people who are feeling hot. Or as they're sweating on the playground, oh, you look like you are hot. Your face is flushed. You're sweating. Describing those feelings. So in teaching interoception is a lot like teaching our social emotional skills. We have to teach what it feels like, teach what it looks like, and then explain it when it happens. And so it can be taught, and kids can become more aware of the interoception needed for toileting, for managing their own health, nutritional intake, and also with monitoring, am I too excited? Am I too happy? You know, it's great to be happy, it's great to be excited, but let's have the emotion match the situation, and let's make sure it's expected. So we can teach those things too. So why is this happening to some of our kids? University of California, San Francisco has been doing MRI and brain imaging for quite a few years. They have detected a difference in brain development for kids that have sensory processing disorder, kids that have ADHD, and kids that have autism. So right now, sensory integration and sensory processing is part of the autism diagnosis. But they are trying to make it a standalone diagnosis. And so they have noticed differences in the areas of the brain that process auditory, visual, and tactile information is different in those kids with sensory processing disorder. They are hoping that the next DSM that comes out, right now we're on DSM-5-TR, that there will be a standalone diagnosis for sensory processing disorder. because not everybody that has sensory processing challenges is on the autism spectrum. So we'll see how that works. But also, the connection between the right and left hand sides of the brain, those integrations are different. And so a lot of times our kids that have these sensory processing issues have trouble crossing midline, doing those bilateral and rotational tasks. So they need the therapy interventions. The rest of the slides talk about, did you get a copy of the slides? We'll have to make sure that you get a copy. If you do email me, I can email you a PDF of it, so I'll be happy to do that. I think they may as well, but I'll send you that. All of the things that I've talked about for the accommodations are included. The assessment I do want to show you. The assessment is something that you can do with a therapist or on your own through the STAR Center. And if you click this link when I send it to you, they have assessments for every age level through adult, pre-K, toddlers, whatever the age of the child you're working with is, you can do a free sensory checklist with them and find out what areas you can work on, and they have lots of great information on that site. It's a free site, but there's also for professionals a paid part to it. So but you can get plenty of information on the free site. Okay, so that's the assessment part. And then the keys to emotional regulation. So we want to balance those emotional responses. It doesn't matter if your child has level 1, 2, or 3 autism. We want to set up the environment. We want to modify the task. We want to adapt wherever we need to add those sensory supports and teach coping skills. Even if that coping skill means stand up and get a pair of headphones off of the wall or wherever you're storing them. Stand up and get what you need, or ask for more of what you need. Some kind of a sign for your sensory support that you need a break. We want our children to become independent self-regulators. When they become independent self-regulators, when they learn all of those things and we adapt, they're going to have those balanced, expected emotional responses to sensory input. So when I do share the rest of the slides through email, it talks about how you modify those sensory environments using visual, auditory suggestions, tactile. We've talked about these as I went through the other slides. Movement options and opportunities. And social emotional learning is very important. We have to teach these skills. We have to demonstrate these skills, and we have to expect these skills. So it's going to help the child succeed in life. And again, it doesn't matter if you're level 1, level 2, or level 3. If you have a sensory challenge, it can interrupt your whole day. It can interrupt your learning, and you can miss periods of learning where you're then not, having the skills to perform at your capacity. So, any questions? This is the task modification. Coping skills, it's all on the slides that I will send you. And again, we've covered many, many of these as we talked about the individual sensory systems. Just when you figure out a whole array of sensory supports, you're going to get somebody that needs something different. So you will become experts, but if you have the opportunity to reach out to your occupational therapist at your school or in your community, I would definitely suggest that. So working with people in the community is very helpful. And not everybody knows everything. We learn from each other, and we're always learning, especially when we're talking about sensory processing and self-regulation. So thanks for being such a great group. If you do have a question, email me, and thank you again for coming. I hope you have a great rest of the day. A couple of questions.
Off the top of your head, do you know the Star Center email or website?
You can just put in the Star Center. They're located in Denver, Colorado. They've been there. Really? You can put in Dr. Lucy Jane Miller and Star Center. I'm surprised a lot came up but there is a link, there is a direct link on the slide, so when you email me, I'll send you those.
What was your email again?
It's my first name, Yvonne, dot, my last name, COS like Sam, ENTINO, at llcc.edu. And if you lose that, I'm at Lincoln Land Community College, Occupational Therapy Assistant Program. My picture pops up in my email, so feel free, and I will be happy to send you that info. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the conference.